Okay, so according to this, okay, I think we're ready to go. Good. I'm live. Okay. Hi everyone. It is Saturday, and this is usually the day that I upload a video. However, I had a video recorded, but I didn't upload it because I didn't feel comfortable with uploading it because, uh, let's just say it was a very critical. It was a very critical reaction to a video that I felt uncomfortable with sharing with people because I felt like it was a bit unfair. I was getting pretty upset, and I don't think that's a good thing to do, especially when I'm under such criticism myself. So instead, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to live stream a reaction to a channel that I've been watching for the better part of a year. They're called Aren't We There Yet? And they are a wonderful, wonderful couple. They have been traveling all over North America. They are currently somewhere between Alaska and British Columbia, I believe. And they have the best cinematography I have ever seen on YouTube, and that is not an exaggeration. By far, the best cinematography I've ever seen. They are wonderful to watch. I have deliberately not reacted or watched them building their school bus because I have the feeling I'm not going to like it. But again, because I've been watching them, I have an emotional connection to this channel. I feel like it's safer for me to make this video because I won't be as critical. I'll be a lot nicer about whatever criticisms I will say, and because I have been watching them and how they use their bus, I have a better understanding of why they built it the way they did. So, without further ado, I'm going to get started into it. I'm just going to go through, they have a playlist of the bus conversion tutorials. I'm just going to go through the most important ones. I have kind of skimmed them a little bit, have kind of an idea of what I'm looking to do. So, we'll get started with the main, just the main conversion tour itself, and I'll give my overall impressions just on the surface. Before I do that, I'm just going to pause for a second. Okay, let's get started.
Hey everyone! So a lot of you have been asking for a video tour of the bus, and we're sorry it's taken so long. We've just been really busy, but now we've got a little bit of time, so we're taking some time to give you a tour.
Alright, so I'm gonna get behind the camera, and Cora's gonna give you a tour of the outside of the bus, and then we're gonna take you inside and give you a full tour of the bus.
Okay, so we're gonna start this way.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second there. Over her left shoulder on the right side of your screen, you can see that it says 3800. So this is an International. It looks like it has the 466E engine, so it'll be an International, a Bluebird likely. I don't know what year, but to me it looks like late 90s, early 2000s. It could be mid 90s too, but that's just the style of the hood that they had at the time. A fairly reliable bus. I have seen some of the issues that they've had on their own channel. Recently, in a more recent video, they had issues with the flywheel had gone out of it, and they've done some other maintenance stuff, such as What am I saying? They had some issues with some belts and some fans and a few things like that, but overall the engine itself seems to have been fairly reliable for them, and they've been doing a lot of traveling, so yeah, we'll just get started with that.
The first thing you're going to see are bikes installed up on the front. This is really, really helpful because this means we can get around places a little easier.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys have noticed this yet, but the front of their bus, you can see that they've got the lights still on there yet. So they have they're called 8-ways. So the red lights that flash on the top of the bus. I would recommend that if you're doing your own bus build, that you would remove those completely instead of leaving them in. Even though they might not be functional, it just looks nicer to remove them, and you can always put something there like floodlights or something like that that can really help you when you're parking or whatnot. Keep in mind, this video is from 6 years ago, so we're talking late 2019, early 2020. So a lot of the stuff that we know now about how to build a school bus has changed significantly in that time, and a lot of the techniques that have been developed over that time were not known at this time. Another thing is, keep in mind, also, like, I'm speaking from my own experience here. I know what I have done for my own schoolie build, and I also know what other people have done by watching what they've done on their own YouTube channels, and I form my opinion based on that. So keep that in mind, that my experience is somewhat limited, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt.
Than having to take the bus, which can be difficult to get into some tight places sometimes. And then on this side, you're actually going to see a side of the bus you guys haven't seen very much in the photos, and that's this side of the mural. It was designed by...
Okay, so I love the mural. I do believe it was hand painted with rollers. Again, it's not something I recommend people doing, is rolling, but again, these guys have been using this bus for 6 years, and it has held up remarkably well. So I can't give them too much of a hard time for that. Another thing I'm noticing is that they did keep most of the school bus windows, which I don't like. I do think that if you're going to be building out a school bus, you should remove the original windows, because even if you seal them up properly, they're still going to leak no matter what you do. That said, I know why they built it the way they did, so we'll get to that in a minute.
By our dear friend Megan Price. We painted it all together, Megan, Jose, and I, and our other dear friends Jeremy Friedberg and Claudio Capoletti. We did it together in Miami, Florida. It was a heck of a job, and it would not have been possible with that team, without that team coming together. And it looks beautiful. It's meant to be kind of an abstraction of the Americas. On that side you have a cityscape, some buildings.
Another thing I forgot to mention, guys, in case you're unaware, this is a husband and wife couple. They are both artists. The husband, he is a photographer, and you can actually go to his website and you can buy prints from them. And I got to say, some of the stuff that they do is pretty awesome. So I'm just gonna scroll down. I don't think they have it on here, but if you go to their YouTube channel, they should have a link to his page somewhere. Again, I highly suggest that you check out this channel, because they have a lot of really cool traveling information and vlogs and stuff like that, especially if you're interested in history of locations, because as they go location by location, they talk about the history of the area, and to me it's really fascinating. And if you're into that kind of thing, then I highly suggest you check these guys out too, because it's super cool.
And over here you have the wave of our beautiful oceans across the Americas. Up top we have the deck. We like to lovingly call that the inspiration station, because it is very inspiring as an artist going up there and watching the sunset. And back here we have the map. We're going to be tracing the route as we go, which will be really fun for people to see on the road. So this is our...
Okay, so another thing I want to point out here is the rooftop deck on the bus. This is something that I do think is not... I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily to have a rooftop deck, but I wouldn't do it with wood like this. Number one, because wood is heavy, and also because I don't like, again, I've said this before, I don't like putting wood on the outside of a vehicle because it just doesn't hold up to weather. Now, I also question how often they actually use this. I'm not 100% sure. I've been watching their stuff for a little while now, and I think I've seen them use it maybe twice. Again, that is in video, so who knows how often they do that off camera. But my question is, does it make sense to have a rooftop deck if you're only going to use it once or twice? Again, that's something you guys have to consider for yourselves if you're building a bus. Personally, I'm not going to bother. I think I'm just going to do a catwalk, because a catwalk is, it allows me to access all the important stuff that I'm going to have on the roof of the bus. Beyond that, I don't really think I want to spend any time up there.
Our garage. We lovingly call it the garage. It's a tiny little space. But this is where we have the generator, tools.
Again, this is a really smart design. If I could, I would do this. Unfortunately, I can't. So, again, my layout's a lot different than theirs. But yeah, no, this is, if you guys are able to do something like this, this is definitely the way to go.
Tools, vacuum, amp, lots of cables, cords. And on this side, all of the electrical, the solar, and all the batteries.
Okay, so I don't know a whole lot about electrical stuff, and I haven't even looked at their electrical setup yet, because to be quite honest with you, I don't even really know what I'm looking at. It's something I have to research yet, and I'm sure these guys know a lot more than I do. My only concern here is you can kind of see the batteries there are being held in with ratchet straps. I don't know how permanent of a solution that is. They may have changed things later on, but again, I don't really know much about this, so I'm just going to move on.
It is truly our garage. And you come around this side, you see the side of the bus that you're more familiar with in the photos. And this is meant to kind of symbolize the mountains and the beautiful landscapes that we have across the Americas.
Now, I do have to say, I do really like the paint job. I do think it's really, really cool. It's colorful, it's interesting. I get so sick and tired of seeing a lot of these white painted bus, and I love seeing color like this. It really makes it pop. I think it's really unique. It draws attention to it in such a way that tells people, hey, I'm a YouTuber, which for some people is fantastic. I know these guys, they're advertising a lot of their business as well through the bus. So this is a good way to do that. Yeah, I don't really have more to say about that other than I like it. I just wish it had been sprayed instead of rolled. That's just personal preference. Again, this looks perfectly fine.
Very abstracted, of course. But beautiful. Toolbox.
Okay, so I was mistaken. This is not a Bluebird. This is a Thomas. Okay, but it still has the DT466E engine, which is an international engine, which is also made by Ford. Or was made by Ford. International, there's a complicated relationship between all the different bus manufacturers and the engines that they're using and all that stuff. So, in case you guys don't know, I do actually drive a school bus for a living, or at least I will be soon. I just finished my training. And I got looking underneath the hoods because that's part of your circle check. Pretty much every single bus now that you're running, if you're not running like propane or electric or something like that, they're almost all using a Cummins engine. So the Thomases are using Cummins, and the Bluebirds are using Cummins as well. Internationals have their own engines. They're using the International. But a lot of school bus companies are actually going away from Internationals because they're just so prone to having issues.
Finally installed and in and holding lots of stuff. And now we are going to head on in.
All right.
Okay, so before we get into that, I just do want to talk about the door for a second. They're using the original school bus doors. This is something I don't recommend people do, mostly because those doors are leaky and they are not very good insulators. But again, because of the way these couple uses their bus, I understand why they did it that way. But we'll get into that in a minute.
Right, so this is the captain seat, and of course, to drive this bus, you need a captain hat. So I have this beautiful captain hat that was made by our friend Claudia Capelletti.
You know, I don't think I've ever seen that before. That is hilarious. I love it.
And Cora also drives the bus, so we also need a co-captain hat, which we have right here. So this is Cora's hat.
I
Right
love
here
it.
we have our
That's funny.
control panel, and we have a backup camera that is really helpful. So
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if you've ever driven a school bus before as a school bus driver, you know that backing up a bus is very difficult as it is, and because you can't really see out the back at all. And so that's why when they come up with school bus routes, they usually try to make them so that you'd never have to back the bus up. The reason you want one on your own schoolie, like a backup camera like this, is because if you're backing into a camping spot or something along those lines, it's nice to have that because you're gonna be backing more often than you would if you're just driving a school bus as a school bus. You gotta remember, you're basically treating this as an RV, right?
to go into tight spaces and to parallel park the bus. And now I'm gonna take you back over there and show you the main space. Alright, so this space right here is my photo and video edit.
Okay, so first impressions, I noticed that they have the skins on the roof of the bus yet, but I do recall them saying that they removed them at one point. It doesn't look like it to me because the rivets all look still stock, but again, I don't know yet. I'll have to look into that. Another thing that I want to talk about is the paint. I normally don't like it when people paint everything white, but these guys were really, really clever in their use of white. So they used white on the ceilings, and they used white on everything except for where they wanted color. Again, I've told you guys before, I've seen a lot of buses where they just paint everything white, and that drives me nuts. But here you can see they got a wall with some colors on it. They've got wood countertops. They've got the seat cushions are like an orangey burgundy color, which I really like. It's bright and light, but it's not clinical and boring like a hospital room. It still feels homey, and I think these guys nailed it on that.
Editing station that is also going to be available for any artist in residence to come and join us. The space is multifunctional, so this is not only a photo and video.
Okay, so I just want to talk about multifunction spaces for a second. I've said this before, but most of the time when you see people who say that they've got a multifunctional space and it can convert from one thing into another, almost, I would say probably about 80% of the time, they never use it as a multifunction space. Usually what they do is they set it one way and they leave it that way because that's just the way it ends up happening. So I do know that they have been using this space for editing videos and photos and all that other stuff as well. So I'm not going to ding him too hard on this one, but again, something to keep in mind for your own build is if you're making a multifunction space, chances are you're not going to use it as a multifunction space, and you're only ever going to convert it maybe once or twice. So you got to think, is it worth it to even do it? If it is, absolutely go for it. Now, in these guys' case, I know they've used this before because I'm pretty sure I remember them having guests on the bus a couple times, and they needed that extra space to have people sitting around. They were playing music and whatnot, and I'm pretty sure somebody stayed overnight in their bus once as well. So, in their case, it worked out for them, and I'm happy for that.
Editing station, but it's also a dinette, good enough for 2 people. This table goes down and it turns into a single bed, and also it turns into a couch. So this is the main couch and can be also turned into a full-size bed. When we have him as a couch, this one and this one can seat 8 people in total, and we can have a table here in the middle to host parties for 8 people.
That is actually really, really cool. Like, look at how big that table is. You don't see that in RVs or anything like that. That's actually a really, really cool design choice. Again, though, how often do they realistically use it? I think I've seen them use it twice on the channel. So that might justify it in your eyes. Personally, I would never bother. But again, this is their bus and not mine, so.
Underneath the couches, there's 2 drawers on each of the couches. We have 2 drawers right here, plenty of storage space. And we have.
I love the. Can I just say that I love the floors, the color of the floors? I think it's important that when you're doing a build where you have extremely light colors on your roof, ceiling, your walls, that you have a contrasting color on your floors. Because again, I've seen a lot of builds where they paint everything white and then they do a light colored flooring and everything just looks washed out. This adds a really, really nice contrast. I actually really like that.
We have 2 little drawers under the dinette seat. Now I'm going to show you my favorite spot in the bus, which is the kitchen. We have a full-size range.
So I do like the range, I like the stove, everything there is fine. My only gripe is I wish that there was a little more counter space. Again, if this works for them, they're just a couple. Personally, I like to cook, so I want to have more counter space, cleaning dishes, all these other things. So this personally would not be enough for me. I'd also want a much larger, deeper sink because I'm a fairly tall guy. And I also like my countertops much higher because, again, I'm 6'1". You can see they're fairly short people. Not to diss them at all, of course not. But you can see how much head height they have between their heads and the ceilings. When I walk into my bus, before I did the roof raise, my head was brushing the ceiling in the center of the bus. So for them, these counter heights work perfectly. I'm really happy that this is working out. And they look to be decent cabinets too.
With a small oven and plenty of drawer spaces for all.
Again, personally, I'd like more than that. I think storage is extremely important in a bus like this. I think they probably could have gone with more overhead storage as well. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about that.
Dishes and cooking utensils. We have our spices drawer. This drawer right here has our place heater. You know, we're not planning to go to cold places, but if we happen to be in a place.
Okay, so this is really funny to me. If you've been watching their channel, they just spent the last, I think, 2 or 3 years in Alaska, and they were talking about how they weren't planning to go to cold places. So this is a classic example of having a plan and it not going at all the way you wanted it to. And again, they're probably looking back on this and laughing as well. There are other mistakes that I want to talk about that they could have changed things a little bit. Again, they did do a couple of years in Alaska, and because of that, they didn't stay the winters in the bus. They stayed the winters usually in cabins or other places like that. So that kind of explains why they didn't do as much insulating as I would have liked to have seen. But I do still think that if they were to go back and do it again, I would think that they would probably want to do everything a little more to completion, because it's nice to be able to not have to leave, because you're essentially moving out every time you have to stay somewhere else. So I think it's a good idea that if you're building your bus now, think ahead and insulate properly. Even if you're using it as an RV, I do still think it's worth it. But again, we'll talk about that later.
Place that is very cold, we have this place heater that we can take it out and put it in different locations to heat the bus up. Right here we have our garbage can. Under there we have a water filter.
So they got a water filter, so that means they probably either have shore hookup or they have a water tank, maybe both. I haven't checked that yet.
Right here we have our filter water.
Okay, so they got filtered water going through the filler thing, and then just your regular wash water.
Running water.
Yeah, okay.
And this is our water pump switch. We have outlets right here. We have outlets under the dinette. We have switches here for lights and LED lights. Or switches here for the bathroom, hallway. Right here under the sink, we have our water heater.
Okay, so they do have a water heater. It looks like it's an on-demand water heater. I could be wrong about that. Again, I don't really know. But, yeah. I don't really have much to say about that. It says, you can see the fire symbol on the water heater there, so it looks like they're probably either using, probably propane, is my guess. I don't think it's an electric water heater.
We have a full-size fridge, we have the freezer, and
Okay, yeah, it looks like a 12-volt fridge. If it, that 12-volt fridges are very expensive, as you're probably aware. I don't know where they got it. They might have got it secondhand or whatever, but 12-volt fridges are definitely more efficient than your regular household fridge. But yeah, they are very, very expensive. So I do think they probably could have saved a little bit of money on the fridge and maybe spent a little more on insulation and things of that nature to kind of like maybe putting in a diesel heater, that kind of thing, just to be a little more comfortable in the colder climates.
and refrigerator down there. We have a microwave. We have plenty of space up here for pens and more storage here. More storage right here for different things. And now Cora is gonna give you a tour of the rest of the bus.
Okay, so here's the bathroom. The door slides open, so that saves for space.
Yep, I like that idea actually, having a sliding door like that. I do think it's a pretty small bathroom. Again, I'm 6'1", so I'm a lot bigger, so my bathroom has to be bigger to accommodate my height. But I mean, it looks good.
And the bathroom is teeny tiny.
Yeah.
But it serves its purpose well. We have a composting toilet,
Composting toilet looks like a nature's head.
which saves us from the black water tank.
Exactly. Yeah, you see a lot of bus people doing this, and I 100% agree. I think this is a really good idea. If you can avoid using a black tank, do it. Black tank is where all your poo goes, basically. Gray tank is like your wash water and that kind of stuff. And your white or clean water tank is where you draw your water from.
Logistics and all that goes around with that. And the shower is tiny. It's 24 inches by 24 inches.
Oh yeah, no, I want a full-size shower. That's too small for me. It looks like they used that plastic wall stuff again. I think I've spoken about this before. Personally, not my aesthetic, but it does look functional. So I can't ding him for that at all. And I'm just kind of looking up in the top left corner of the screen there. And you notice how the roof panels are held in with Phillips screws. So I know Thomas, in some of their buses, used Phillips screws instead of rivets to hold in their ceiling panels. Now, I don't know if that's the case for this bus or if they took the panels down and put them back up again, but we are going to be looking at that later, so we'll go back. We'll come back to that.
And there's just enough space to get clean, and that's what it's for. So there you go. Okay, so now we're gonna go back into my favorite room, the studio. So it's actually a very
Now, this is super cool. I do love this. I like the idea of having a studio. Again, the only reason I didn't go for this is because I need the space for other things. My bathroom's going to be full size. I'm going to have washer and dryer. Like, that stuff just eats up a lot of space. And these guys obviously don't have a full-size bathroom. They kept it fairly small and compact, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. And they dedicated more room to their studio, because that's probably what's important to them. I do want to draw your attention to the very top of the screen there. You see how they have the emergency exit still there? That is something that I don't particularly agree with. Those emergency exits are known to leak pretty badly. And again, you have very expensive... You got a keyboard, you got your speakers, you got your computer, all of it's sitting right underneath it. And if any of that water drips down onto your expensive equipment, it could potentially ruin it. again, they've been living it for 6 years, and clearly it seems to be working for them. But I am curious to know what kind of issues they've faced and other things that they've had to fix. Another thing I want to point out is that from the outside of the bus, you can see that the windows go all the way to the back, but from the inside, it looks like they've covered them up. So they essentially built walls in front of the windows, and I don't particularly like that idea either. I think it would have been better off to remove the windows entirely and just sheet metal it over. Again, that is personal preference, but I do think that there is a health risk in that as well. Even if you seal the bus windows, they will still leak no matter what you do. School bus windows suck. They just do. And you have the potential for water getting down behind in your walls, black mold, mushrooms, spores, all that other yucky, icky stuff, especially because, well, we'll get to that in a second, but this also doubles as their bedroom, so we'll get to that in a sec.
Very multifunctional space, but right now you can see we have it set up as the recording studio. It's almost fully soundproof, so it works really well. Actually, you can fit a surprising amount of people in here. We had the Tanglewood chorus come in the other day, and we had about 16 students packed in here, and they sang Lean On Me. We all have pain, we all have sorrow. Sounds pretty good. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. I wish I could play the whole thing, but we don't have time. So the cool thing about this space is that it's super convertible. So the piano can go in, the speakers go down, all the recording gear gets taken down.
Okay, so she talks about how the piano could go in. I like that. The speakers can go down. By that, does she mean that they can drop into the desk, or do you have to physically take them off every time you want to put your bed down? Again, that would pose a problem for me because I like leaving my recording studio up, because having to put it up and take it down all the time is a bit of a pain. So if it were me, I'd probably end up leaving it one way or the other. Again, if you're driving along, you got to think a lot of the stuff is going to be happening where you're driving along, you're putting everything inside your bus through what's essentially an earthquake every time you drive it. So you want to make sure that anything that could potentially move can't. And if you have to put stuff away every time you want to drive the bus, that can become a real hassle. So personally, what I would do is I would fix the speakers in place to stop them from moving. And yes, I know that's not ideal for sound quality, but you have to do what you have to do. It is a mobile recording setup. I understand that there's sacrifices you have to make in order to make that happen. She does say that it's a completely soundproof room, which is excellent. I love that. But there are also a lot of hard surfaces which could potentially reflect and bounce sound around. You should ideally have some bass traps in there somewhere. But again, these are sacrifices that you have to make when you're on the road. So there's no perfect solution.
And put away our instruments. Go in these closets here where we also keep our clothes.
Very, very smart design. I wish there was a little more closet space for the clothing. I have the feeling they probably ended up using more than just that, because it looks like the entire bottom half is all instruments. And again, I love instruments. I have multiple instruments. I play music. I'm gonna have a full drum kit in my bus. So yeah, I understand completely. Music is important. However, dedicating a little more room to clothing probably would have been a better design choice.
Some personal items. Even the seat, which is actually a cajon.
Okay. Alright, so I saw this earlier, and I do want to point this out. Using a cajon as a seat for your recording studio, I wouldn't recommend it. I spend a lot of time in front of my computer, especially if you're doing recording. It can take me anywhere between 6 to 12 hours to record a single song. And if you're sitting in front of a computer, diddling around, playing with stuff, not that kind of diddling around. Do not take that the wrong way, YouTube. You want to be comfortable. And I can tell you from personal experience, sitting on a cajon is not a comfortable experience. I own a cajon. I've played cajons in churches and stuff before. Definitely not recommended. I would also like to point out the finishes in this room, that they just have a plywood countertop. I would normally criticize that. However, this is a functional space. So I completely understand why they did it that way. So I'm not going to ding that at all because, again, it just makes sense. It's a functional space. It's built for a purpose. Now, you can also tell that the bed is built with a little more love and a little more care. It's got some nice finishes on it. And that is because that is a living space. And so you're basically separating your work and your living space.
That can go down underneath. And then what you end up with is this beautiful, completely open room with a really long desk, and that can be used for painting or sewing or textile work or whatever kind of medium Bosé and other visiting artists need to spread out and do their work. Then the third use is our bedroom. So this is the bed. These actually double as a great place to put coffee when you have people in here. And the bed folds down, comes down, and it's a full double bed where we sleep at night.
Okay, so something I do want to point out as well. It looks like they have the piece of plywood, and then the bed sits on top of that piece of plywood. I don't know much about mattress technology, but something I have been told is that you want to have breathing space underneath your mattress. Otherwise, you could potentially get mold. So what that usually takes the form of is, usually they'll use wood slats underneath a mattress. A box spring is also a common use, but again, in a bus, space is at a premium. So you want to avoid using box springs in a bus. What I would have done in this situation is I would have put holes in the plywood just to allow some breathing space to get in on, around, and under the mattress, just to prevent any mold from happening.
So the final use of this space is a photography studio for the portraits. So we have a black backdrop that we can hang up, and Jose can do his portrait series. So that is the tour of the bus. You've already seen the garage area behind that door there, and stay tuned because we have a lot of footage and photographs and recordings.
Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to screensaver. I'm going to open up another video from them. We're going to get into more the nitty-gritty about how they're building this. We'll start with the subfloor. Yeah, I think we'll start with the subfloor. Yeah, okay, so we'll open that up. Okay, so we'll start with this here. First off, before we even start, I just want to point out, it looks like they've already painted their floors. They've patched all the holes. Again, I've said this before, you don't necessarily need to do that because having holes in your floors is actually a good thing. It means that any water or moisture that gets underneath your floors has a place to go. So we'll just get straight into it, and I'll kind of talk as he's talking.
So we have a big Home Depot day today. We got the insulation and the Loctite glue to glue the insulation down to the floor. It's a little late into the evening, so I don't think we're gonna get to glue it today, but we might get to cut it. So let me go get this insulation.
Okay, so here's one thing I kind of wanted to point out, and this is a common pitfall that a lot of bus builders do. They're using the foam with the aluminum foil on it, and I understand why people choose this because it has an R value for its thickness. It has a higher R value than the next equivalent, which is like your Formula or something like that. Here's the problem with that is the reason why it has a higher R value is because of that aluminum sheeting. That aluminum is designed to reflect heat, and it needs headspace to work. It's more meant for like your attic, that kind of thing. So it needs a bit of an air gap to work. So when you're sandwiching it between layers of other stuff, it's less effective. So basically what's actually happening is you're only getting the actual R value of the insulation itself. So what it says on the board is actually going to be, so you're actually going to get less insulation value, the R value, than what it says on the foam board. So again, this is a common pitfall. A lot of people fall for this. I wish more people knew about it, and again, it doesn't really matter in the long run so long as you're comfortable. But these guys have other problems I want to point out, so we'll get to that in a second.
So I'm going to show you the insulation that we're going to use on the floor. We chose to do a rigid foam board insulation because that's what it seems most of the people doing stoolie convert.
Yeah, and that's a common pitfall, is this is what most people seem to be doing, so we're going to do the same thing. Again, I don't blame them. This was 6 years ago. So this was what was known back then. I'm looking at the thickness, I believe. How thick is it?
Merchants out there are doing. We don't want to sacrifice very much headroom, so we're only going with a 1/2 inch of an.
Okay, so they don't want to sacrifice headroom. If you don't want to sacrifice headroom, I would suggest you do a roof raise. And I know they didn't want to do a roof raise. I understand that, but again, based on what I'm seeing in this picture here, it looks like she has about 1.5 feet of space between the top of her head and the bus roof, rather. So I would say that sacrificing head space shouldn't have been a priority here. I think insulating your floors is more important, and 1/2 inch of insulation is definitely not enough. I would go with at least 1 inch, if not more. If you're using it as an RV, you want about probably at least 1 inch. If you're living in it, I would say no less than 4 inches. And how are they going to say they were going to install it?
Insulation, and then there will be another about 1/2 inch of plywood on top.
Okay, and again, 1/2 inch of plywood, in my personal opinion, is not enough. I would go with 3/4 inch, because 3/4 inch will give you something to screw into. It's a lot stronger. It has more bite. It has less chance of moving when you're walking on it. And then another added benefit of doing a thicker plywood is you don't have to worry about screwing it down or anything like that. You just glue it down and you're good to go.
It's got an R value of 3.6. It's not
Again, R value 3.6, realistically, you're probably only getting about half of that because of what I described earlier.
awesome, but it's not nothing. And we just gotta cut it up into pieces to fit on the floor and tack it down with some Loctite PL Premium Fast Wrap. That's what we got for it.
So you're using PL glue to glue it down, which is excellent. I'm glad that they're not framing out their floors, because again, that is entirely unnecessary. I'm happy they're doing it this way.
So we're about to glue down the insulation foam boards to the metal floor, which has enamel paint on it now. So a big, obvious.
So they used enamel paint. Interesting. Okay, I do think that a rust paint probably would have been a better choice, or a rust conversion paint, something just to prevent rust from happening. I'm also seeing a lot of patches on their floor. Again, this is something I see a lot where people patch every single hole in their floor. It's not necessary, guys. It's not even something I would worry about, honestly. If you're using the right insulation, the insulation should be the right insulation should be water resistant anyways.
Our huge priority is to make sure that this sticks, that the glue, the adhesive that we use, is able to form a really strong bond between this material and this material.
Okay, so again, because you're laying something on the floor of the bus, this isn't something I would necessarily be that concerned with. The only reason you want to make sure you glue things down really well is because you don't want it to squeak as you're walking on it. Beyond that, gravity itself will hold everything down to the bottom of the bus, even when you're driving along. If you have all your walls, your furniture, everything sitting on top of your floor, I wouldn't worry about making sure that you have a good bond. It just needs to be good enough that it doesn't squeak as you're walking on it. If you've ever been in an older house or even houses that were built mid-century, as you're walking around you hear squeaks and creaks and groans. That's because they didn't glue the subfloor down. They just nailed it in. So, again, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, but I do like that she's testing it before she's trying it, because the worst thing that you could possibly have is you're putting down a chemical and it has a reaction that you were not expecting, and next thing you know, your entire project's ruined. So really smart for testing it out, and yeah, we'll just get...
Prep it and make sure it's free of grease and dust. What I'm going to do is use Prep-All to prep the floor surface and this product. So, but I'm going to test the Prep-All on this insulation board just to make sure we don't have any weird reaction or doesn't cause any disintegration or anything like that. We test it here to make sure that we're able to put the Prep-All and prep this surface as well as this surface. And let it sit for a minute. Okay, at least now it's been a minute.
Alright, so we are ready to glue the insulation down to the board, and we're using this adhesive. It's supposed to be eight times stronger than regular adhesive.
Yep, that'll work just fine.
We
Yeah.
decided to go with this one because we were going back and forth between liquid nail and this one, but we decided to go on this one because it's very flexible, so we hope it's gonna help with the vibration, but also...
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Something I never even considered. Most people just say, use PL glue. It'll work just fine. Flexibility, I don't think, is a huge concern here because the flex will be over such a large surface area that I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, buses originally just had a layer of plywood and then vinyl flooring on top of it, and it was just glued down, and that's basically it. So I wouldn't be too overly concerned about it.
So once we put the plywood on top of the insulation, we're going to place screws in some areas just to lock it down to the floor. So this is just an extra measure of having everything locked down to the floor. Alright, let's start applying the adhesive.
Okay, yeah, so they're not framing in their floors. Guys, I harp on about this. You don't need to frame your floors, and I'm so happy these guys didn't do that. Because as I've told you before, framing in your floors causes thermal bridging. You want to avoid thermal bridging.
Move this around so I can walk on it and make sure it spreads, and then we're gonna add some weight.
Yeah, no, personally, I do think that if they'd gone with like a 2-inch Foamular pink stuff instead, it has a lot more compressive resistance. So as you're stepping on it, it won't dent as easily. This stuff, it looks like there's quite a bit of flex in it, and that does worry me a little bit. But again, once you put plywood over top of it, it's probably going to be fine. Okay. One thing I want to point out here, it looks like they taped all of their joints. If they had done a double layer of this, they could have stacked them together like bricks, where you cover one joint with the next layer of insulation, and they wouldn't have needed to do this. Personally, what I would have done is gone through with maybe a little bit of spray foam in between to fill the joints, and then tape over top. But again, because it's such a small amount of insulation, I don't think it makes that much of a difference anyways. So this probably works just fine.
And ready to go? So, wish us luck as we lay down our subfloor.
Yeah, yesterday we went and got the plywood, we cut it so that it can fit in the seam around the edges over there. So it's gonna be nice and tight. We're gonna apply some glue and we're gonna put some screws in some key areas to keep the plywood down.
Yeah, and we're making sure that the screws that we got are actually going to go through the metal of the bottom of the bus.
Okay, that was a mistake. Alright, you don't need to screw your plywood through into the metal of the bus if you have everything glued down really well. Again, if you'd gone with 3/4 inch plywood instead of 1/2 inch plywood, that would not even be a concern. And
Us to make it extra secure.
We're using stainless steel.
that's another mistake. You're screwing stainless steel screws into regular metal. Here's the problem. When you put a non-corrosive metal into a corrosive metal, you put them in contact with each other, direct contact, the non-corrosive metal will actually corrode faster. I don't know why. Some scientist out there could explain it better, but I have actually seen this happen on my own bus, where the mirrors were held in with stainless steel screws through metal plates on the backside, and those metal plates were falling apart. I can't explain why that happens. I'm sure somebody in the comments section who's got a little more experience with that kind of stuff can tell me, but again, not only is it unnecessary for them to screw the panels down, it's also really, really bad because it's not going to mean anything if the metal around the screws rots and the screws pull out anyways. So again, I don't think that this was necessarily a good idea, but again, they've been living in it for 6 years and they haven't complained about it. So we'll see.
Screws, because they're non-corrosive and hopefully they will last for a long, long, long time. Right, so.
Yeah, so the screws will last for a long time, but the floor around them might not. So again, I do think that this was kind of a waste of time. Just gluing it down probably would have been fine.
Shall we do it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so another thing I kind of want to point out here is you notice how the joints of between the plywood kind of line up with the joints of the insulation. You kind of want to avoid that because basically what's going to happen is cold temperatures can work their way through the joints a lot quicker than they can through the insulation. So what I would have done is I would have staggered the joints so that the joint was in the center, in the middle of each sheet of insulation rather than directly over the joint of the insulation. Okay, so for the last piece there, you saw them putting it down, taking it up, putting it down, taking it up, putting it down, taking it up. That tells me that they're test fitting everything and making adjustments as they go. That's really smart. Don't put glue down until you're absolutely sure that the piece is going to fit. Otherwise, you might be you might be kicking yourself later. This is something I've learned the hard way. Okay, so that's the end of that video. I'm just going to switch back over to this. And I'm going to pop up another video. One I want to look at is how they're insulating the walls.
Hey, okay, so what we're doing now is we are adding insulation into the walls. We've already cut some pieces. I'll show
Okay, so I just want to talk about their choice of insulation for a second here. So they're using rock wool insulation, which is perfectly fine. It's water resistant. However, it does not provide a vapor barrier. So if they're going to be putting this up, they will have to put up a vapor barrier between this and their interior cladding, because otherwise it could potentially cause issues with condensation. It also looks like they haven't really put up any strapping at all. So I'm curious to see how they're going to have the insulation stay in. I think it looks like just they're doing the walls right now. But I'm curious to see how they're going to make that work.
you those. What we're actually using is a rock wool, and it comes in packets like so. And basically, we just have to cut it to size for the size of the wall panels.
So I do want to point out, like, there's nothing wrong with using rock wool or even house insulation in a bus. You just have to take extra steps to make sure that it cannot get wet. Rock wool is better because, again, it doesn't mold, it doesn't rot, doesn't do all the stuff like your regular insulation might. But you do have to take some extra steps to make sure that you're safe with it, because it could still harbor moisture and cause mold to grow.
See it compressed right now, but once you open it up, it starts to open out. So yeah, it's mineral wool, and it's got a high R value. It's really good for sound dampening, which is great for keeping this bus quieter, as it will contain recording studio. All right, so these ones are pre-cut, and they all gonna go in the wall.
So personally, what I would have done, I would have spray foamed the entire bus. Closed cell spray foam. Yes, it's not as good for sound recording, but then what you could do in your recording studio is do open cell spray foam so that it will absorb more sound. So I would do a layer of, I would do the entire bus with closed cell first, and then where the recording studio is, do another layer on top of that with open cell, and that will provide your sound dampening that you need.
Like this. And then we'll be putting some down in this cavity as well. Okay, so getting the insulation in the lower part of the wall is kind of tricky. And so what we're doing is we're taking this thin sheet of whatever it is, plywood, and putting it in here. And then taking this.
Okay, so this is a part here where I would have just gone with spray foam. Even like the canned stuff where you just fill up the entire cavity. Yes, it's more expensive, but not only will it do a better job of filling all the cracks, you also won't compress your insulation like you will here. When you compress your insulation, you actually reduce its R value. Because what you're essentially doing is, so insulation relies on air pockets between its fibers in order to provide insulation. It uses air pockets to stop heat or cold from coming through. So when you compress your insulation, you're actually reducing the amount of air pockets that are in the insulation, which causes your heat to actually transfer through the material much easier, because there's less air pockets to stop that from happening.
And then taking the insulation and pressing it down, which I'm not too happy about doing, but it's come a necessary evil. Pressing it in. The reason we're doing
So yeah, I think this is this is probably more work than it's worth, to be honest. Again, I do think that they would have been better off just putting spray foam in behind those those wall gaps. They could still do the rock wool insulation above those what I call seat rails. But again, it's 6 years ago and things were different back then.
Doing this is because there's nails. There's like screws coming in from the other side. So if we were just to try and push this down, it would get all ripped and torn up and wouldn't go down because there's screws in there. So this board is kind of blocking the screws. So you might be wondering why we can't just take those screws out. Well, because on the outside they are rivets. So we would have to go with the angle grinder on each and every one, which would be way too much. So instead, we're getting the insulation in like this. Some focusing. Alright, so now we get the other piece.
Okay, so I just want to point out something here. It looks like they did put up strapping there to space out so that the insulation isn't, isn't sticking out from the wall. I do kind of want to point out that they're using dimensional lumber as strapping, which I do not recommend. I always say this: use plywood. Plywood's better in pretty much every single way. It's more stable. It won't expand and contract in different weather, temperatures, moisture levels, whatnot. It also has less of a tendency to split when you drive screws through it, so you don't have to put as many pilot holes in it. Another thing I want to point out is that they're putting the strapping directly onto the ribs of the bus. This I do not recommend. You want to have as much insulation interrupting between the outer structure and the inner structure. So the more you can do, the better. And the way they did it here is it can contribute to thermal bridging. Something you want to avoid for sure. What I would have done is I would have done horizontal strapping, because then your contact point between your strapping and your metal ribs is less than an inch or less than 2 inches squared at every spot. Right here you have full contact between the wood and the metal, and that is going to be a cold spot or a hot spot depending on what time of year it is. Okay, so that's the end of that video. I'm just going to switch to another one of their videos. Which one should we do next? Patch and prime. Side panels. Ceiling panels. How to remove ceiling panels.
Alright, so the next step will be to remove this AC unit. The reason why we want to remove it is, first of all, is because the compressor doesn't work. So it will take a lot of money to fix it.
Okay.
It's not worth it since we're going to install.
Yeah, no, that's fair. If the air compressor, or if the compressor doesn't work anyways, you might as well get rid of it. I would just caution you to be careful of the refrigerant that might be in the lines. You definitely don't want to breathe that stuff in. It's not healthy. And you definitely do not want to release that into the atmosphere, also because it's unhealthy.
Rooftop unit. And also, if this was working, it will only work while we're driving because the compressor is...
So that may be true. However, while you're driving, your rooftop unit air compressor may not be able to run because you're driving. So having an air conditioning while you're driving might actually be a good thing too. But again, he said the compressor doesn't work anyway, so they might as well remove it. So again, my bus doesn't have air conditioning to begin with, and I have no plans of putting it in. So again, I don't, bo- I, again, I'm not upset about this. I'm just pointing out the potential pitfalls.
Is run by the engine, so we need to have AC when we park, and so this is using a lot of space, and it's ugly. I didn't like it from the beginning, so I'm so happy to remove this. I'm going to remove all these screws to see what kind of tools that we need.
So he did talk about how he doesn't like it because it's ugly, so he wants to remove it. So I do kind of want to point out, and this is not a ding against them at all, guys. His reasons for removing this are completely valid, and I understand. I do kind of want to caution you against removing things because they're ugly. When you're building a bus like this, your primary purpose is either you have to remember, you have to keep in mind what the purpose of the bus is. Living in it, using it in an RV, you want to build it to that purpose. So I would rather something be functional and somewhat ugly than for it to be pretty and completely useless. So just keep that in mind, that form should always follow function when you're building a school bus.
To remove this from the ceiling, right? So these things are holding up this thing to the ceiling, so we're gonna need a ratchet to remove this thing. And then I guess I'm gonna need a couple of extra hands to hold this thing. It looks heavy.
Yeah, it'll be heavy, and it's also worth a lot of money at the scrapyards. Ask me how I know that one. It's interesting to me how it's basically held on by a plate, like a cleat almost on the back, and just two bolts. Like I thought there would be more kind of holding it in, but I guess that's it.
This hose is out tomorrow. Alright, so today we are going to remove this other AC. And to do this, we got help from Denmark. This guy flew all the way from Denmark because he's an expert in removing air conditioning for school buses. Yeah. And he's going to.
Excellent. So they brought in an expert, somebody who knows what they're doing. Hopefully he can evacuate the refrigerant lines as well safely so that they're not having any issues with contamination or whatnot.
Help do this. Sorry we didn't introduce him before. He's been helping us with the windows. He's a professional window remover as well. So if anyone out there is doing a bus conversion, call this guy. I just kidding. This Christopher is a really good friend. He's gonna join us on the bus trip sometime in the next few years. Some countries in South America. So he had to come and pay for his ticket by working with us. Alright, Christopher, let's get this out. So we need to remove these things, the brackets that we're holding the AC up, so that we can remove the panels and get to the insulation.
Okay, so remember earlier I was talking about how some of the older Thomas buses used Phillips screws instead of rivets to hold the panels in. Alright, so it looks to me like this bus originally came with Phillips screws holding the panels in. And here comes my usual rant about Phillips screws. I hate Phillips screws. I hate them. But in this particular application, I do think that they're better than rivets because they're far easier to remove than rivets. But yeah, I still hate them. So, you know, I just wanted to point that out because that seems to be a running theme on this channel.
Get the first one out.
Something I do want to caution people against. So you notice how they're wearing gloves here? Yeah, do that, please. I don't think I did when I did my bus, and this stuff you got to be really careful with because it is really, really sharp, and it could potentially cut you. So I got lucky because I never got cut by this stuff, but you could very easily be cut by it. So please, please wear gloves. Ideally, I'd like to see the one guy wearing pants instead of shorts, but again, I do the same thing, so I can't really throw any shade that way. Okay, so it looks like they did remove all of the panels from the inside. So does that mean that they put them back up again after re-insulating? I'm curious to see what they did there. Because you remember when we watched the video earlier of the completed bus, it looked like they had those panels back in again. So they must have removed them and then taken all the insulation out, re-insulated, and then put the panels back in again.
Time to start building. Put the new insulation in. Start building. That's gonna be a hell of a job.
No truer words have been spoken. So yeah, they did put the panels back in again after putting insulation in. Yeah, I actually did briefly consider doing that for my own build, but the reason I didn't is because number one, I ruined a lot of the panels and I ended up reusing them for other things. And number two, because I'm adding extra thickness for insulation. I definitely didn't want to re-screw my panels back into the existing metal ribs because, again, thermal bridging could cause issues with condensation and whatnot. So I believe that's the end of that particular video. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to switch to a different video again. Let's see what we got. Frame walls. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so... Alright, so right off the bat, I do want to talk about their choice in framing materials. They're using 2x4 dimensional lumber. Again, this is 6 years ago. This was pretty standard for what a lot of buses did, is they used dimensional lumber. I've been a proponent of using 3/4 inch... sorry. I've been a proponent of using plywood. Sorry, I don't know why that blanked on me for a second there. I also kind of want to point out, kind of, look at that pickup truck's rim in the background there. Like that. I don't know why I just noticed that, but allow me to make fun of that a little bit, because that's kind of silly and kind of ridiculous, and it looks kind of dumb. Is that a pickup truck? Wait, no, that looks like a... I don't even know what that is. But yeah, I hate the rims. Anyways, continuing.
Hi everyone, we finally got to the exciting part of the bus conversion, which is building the walls for the studio. So from this point on, it's just building the walls, getting the bed right there.
Okay, so it looks like they're doing the walls before they're putting the insulation in the ceiling. Uh, this is going to make their job much more difficult later on. And again, this is also going to cause issues with thermal bridging. You can see it on the very top of the screen there. It looks like they put angled brackets screwed right into the metal frame there, and then they screwed the wood to that. But the problem is the wood is right up against the roof of the bus. And if they're putting insulation in between that, that means there's no insulation between the outside of the bus and the inside, so you're going to have thermal bridging again there. Personally, what I would have done is insulated, put your ceiling skin in, then build your walls. That way your walls are sitting up against the ceiling. You can always screw into the ceiling that way. It's much easier, much stronger. This will work again, but again, this is not how I do it.
Here, Cora's desk for his studio, and they keep on building for the cabinets, for kitchens, bathrooms, showers, and all the things that are about to come. We're really lucky to have my brother Jairo helping us. He's a master carpenter, so I don't have to be dealing with all the crazy measurements to make sure that all this is straight and built perfectly. So stay tuned, and there are more videos coming out showing the rest of the things we've done so far.
Okay, so they're cutting them into strips, and it also looks like they're planing them down to a certain thickness. Okay, so it looks like they're putting strapping in there. Again, I keep saying this. If you're doing this yourself, guys, don't use dimensional lumber. Use plywood. It's just better. Okay, so that's interesting. It looks like they're holding their frames together with angle brackets. I've never really seen that before in a bus like this. If it were me, I think I would build the frames first, and just screw them together and then set them up right. I don't understand why they're not just screwing into the ends of the boards. Why are they using brackets for everything? That's kind of confusing to me. I feel like this would be more work and less sturdy. I'm not sure why they did that. Interesting. So they're doing residential wiring, which again is not a problem. That's perfectly fine. You have to have some 110 in a bus, especially if you're planning to do like if you're gonna have like a toaster oven, that kind of thing that runs on 110. You kind of have to have it no matter what you do. I'm just surprised that they're doing that style. Most bus builds, they use plastic housing. Not to say that metal won't work, but the whole point of metal is that it provides a grounding service, and then all the metal boxes get connected together through a ground. At least that's how it works up in here in Canada. I don't know how it works in the States, but yeah, most bus builds that I've seen use plastic. So something I do want to point out, it looks like they have a guy coming in who's a professional electrician who knows what he's doing. And If you don't know what you're doing when it comes to electrical, guys, I would 100% recommend you do it this way. Just pay the guy, get it done. If you don't know what you're doing, because you could potentially, like, electricity is one of those things you do not want to mess around with. If you don't know what you're doing, either do a ton of research and learn it as best as you can, or hire somebody. Because if you get it wrong, you could potentially burn your place down. I also want to point out how he's screwing the boxes in. That's a good thing. You do not want to nail your boxes in a bus, because as the bus moves and shakes and as you're driving down the road, the boxes could potentially come loose and that could cause other issues. You could potentially have live wires disconnecting, arcing, causing fires, that kind of thing. Screw your boxes in, guys. It's just safer in a bus like this. Okay, that I don't like. Screwing directly into the rib like that is definitely not something you want to do with a box like that. Why? Well, you can see that it's coming off of the rib there, and you're also, that's just going to be another spot where cold air can just come right through. You're going to have a cold draft coming through your boxes when you do something like that. So again, this electrician, he's probably used to working in a residential house. He's probably not used to working in buses. So again, a lot of the stuff that we would normally do in a bus differently to account for certain things, such as the movement of the bus and all that, it doesn't look like he really knows to do that. And I don't blame him. Again, this is 6 years ago. The things we know now, they didn't know then. So I'm sure that if they could go back and do it again, they'd probably change some things.
Alright, so we got all the electrical cables installed today. We hired an electrician to do it because we don't want the bus to burn, or spend hours and hours trying to figure this out on YouTube videos. And now we're ready to continue building up. So there's gonna be a couch over there, there's gonna be a power outlet right there.
Okay, so it looks like they did most of their bus in 110. I do kind of question whether or not the electrician also did the 12 volt, or if they're going to do the 12 volt themselves.
Here's the thing. And then we have lights in the ceiling. We have dedicated power for the stove and the fridge. Then we have another one.
Oh, so the fridge and the stove is not... I thought the fridge was 12 volt, but I could be wrong. Because he said dedicated power for the fridge and the stove, but he didn't say if it's 12 volt or if it's 110.
For microwave. That's gonna be my working station. It has an outlet for computer monitor, and for all the artists and residents are gonna come here and hook up their tablet, their phone, and all that. And then we have lights for the bathroom, and of course the electrical for the studio. We're gonna have 3 switches right here for the studio lights, bed lights, the outlet for chorus equipment, and we're gonna have a garage light. So stay tuned for updates as we build this thing.
Okay, so it looks like it's all 110. I didn't see any 12 volt that I could tell. Like, there is some 12 volt, but that I'm assuming that's the original bus wiring for like the lights and stuff like that. Yeah. I don't really know what to say about that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So again, I'm going to switch to a different video. One thing I do kind of want to check with them. Schoolie roof, floor plan, Propane tank, no, I'm good on that. Air conditioning. Seal schoolie windows. Okay. Alright, so I kind of want to see how they sealed these windows, because I am convinced that no matter how well you seal a school bus window, it's still going to leak no matter what you do. So I do kind of want to see what they do here.
Hi! So what we're doing is we are removing all the old caulk from around the windows. It's all cracked and filled with gunk and dirt and all that fun stuff. So we're removing it so that we can then clean and then re-caulk the whole thing on the outside and on the inside as well. So I'm using a caulk remover to help soften up the caulk, so to make it a little easier to take it out with. We got a multi-use caulk tool, so it's like for removing and applying. So it makes it a little easier to then start scraping out with this guy. After we get it all out, then I'll scrape it again with a utility knife and do a little bit of sanding, nice and clean, before we then reapply the new caulk, which we're going to use actually just 100% silicone.
Alright, so we thought that...
Oh, 100% silicone. Yeah, no, that's, I wouldn't recommend that. Okay, so it looks like what they're doing is they're removing the windows, they're cleaning the caulk out, they're putting new caulk in, and then putting the windows back in again. Here's the problem with that. Sealing around the window doesn't do you much good when the window sliding mechanism itself doesn't seal properly. 90% of the leaks that I've seen in school buses come from windows that can't be closed properly. Either the tabs are broken, or they don't go up all the way, or the seals on the top of the window are no good. This is definitely not the way I would recommend to do this.
We were going to just clean the old caulking here. We've been using that caulk remover, but it makes it really sticky. So we figured out that using a X-Acto knife works better than using this caulk removing tool.
So if I were them, what I would have done is I would have just removed all the windows and then reskinned the outside with metal, and then just put RV windows in. It would have cost a little more, yes, but at the end of the day, it would have saved probably a lot of time and a lot of effort. Oh no, maybe not, because you still have to remove all the rivets, although most of the rivets on this bus are actually screws, so they probably would have been all right. But you know, if you're gonna do this, guys, I would recommend just take the windows out, seal them up properly, put in RV windows. It's just so much better.
And we're gonna have to remove all the windows if we want to do a good job, because unless we take the window out, we won't be able to clean very well all the old caulking. So we're just going to remove it. I think this one is ready to be removed. So let's see what we got over here. There it is. There it is. We got the first window out. We're gonna clean all the edges. So you see, it's really hard to work in the middle of these corners to remove this thing, and we're afraid we're gonna have a lot of furniture behind, and we're gonna build a wall all around where the studio and the sleeping area is going to be, and we don't want to have any surprises down the road.
Yeah, so yeah, so building a wall's in front of a window. Again, I would say just remove the window and put up sheet steel. That's really the only advice I could give there. Again, this is from 6 years ago. Keep that in mind, that a lot of the stuff that we know now, they didn't know then, and they're probably going to end up having issues. They have been living in this for 6 years, but again, they don't live in it in the winter. From what I've seen, they've been renting out cabins, or they're living at people's places during the winters, which is fine. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to see if they were to tear down the walls in the studio, if they would be finding any kind of mold or mushrooms or anything back in there. Because I kind of get the feeling that they would.
So we're gonna go all the way so that we can clean everything perfectly, so that we don't have any leaks in the future. we got the window ready and clean, we started using this thing, but it wasn't working really well for us, so we decided to use mineral spirit to clean around the frame, get the excess. There's some very critical parts right here. There's a big hole right there, and if you don't seal this very well, you're gonna get water coming in. And actually this window was leaking, so we have to make sure that we put enough to cover all these areas right here.
Again, you're relying on the caulking to prevent it from leaking, and I try to do that as little as possible. Personally, I wouldn't use silicone at all. I'd use either panel bond or not. Well, maybe not panel bond, but like what would be a good example? See, I use seam sealer. Seam sealer on pretty much everything, because boy does it ever seal, and it's flexible still, but it's a lot more robust, and it's meant to be painted over. Caulking, they said they're using 100% silicone caulking. It's not really meant for exterior use like this. Yeah, in a household situation maybe, but on a vehicle that's going to be moving and driving,
and put it along the line over here, and then we're gonna put the window, and then you seal the edges.
Okay, so they're sealing the frame of the window, but again, that's not going to matter if the window itself is leaking. Will this help? Absolutely, probably will help a lot. But again, I just remove them, guys. It's much easier. Saves you a lot of effort later down the line. Okay, so I just scrolled down to have a look at the comments. Just starting again on the build, and I want to get it right from the outside to the inside of the house. This video is leading the way. I'm really worried that people who are saying things like this, who are actually copying this technique, are going to regret it in the future. And yeah, you can see I've also had a few leaks after sealing my bus with butyl tape and caulk. I'm going to pull them out and do them this way because it looks the better method. Again, why would you do that when you can just do what Chuck Cassidy here is doing on the right side and just install RV windows? It's way easier, safer. So I kind of want to see if they reply. Okay, so the silicones work perfectly. We haven't had any issues with it, so watertight. This is 4 years ago, so this was 2 years after this video was done. 4 years since we have been on the roads, no leaks yet. Okay. But again, depends on how long you're living in it. Just because it works for these guys doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. I wouldn't trust caulking. Not a chance. Another issue is, just because they don't think they have any leaks doesn't mean that there aren't any, because if a leak happens on the bottom side of a window, it could just be going down inside of a wall, and you would never know that there's a leak there. So again, my bet is if they were to pull all the walls off, all the insulation out, I'll bet you they'd be finding water leakage. That's my guess. And then they might even find mushrooms. They might find black mold.
part's done. Done with the windows.
Okay. Well, I think I've seen enough of this to kind of know the basic idea of how they build things. Yeah, I have thoughts. um, Personally, if I were building a bus, this is not how I would do it. This is just not. I don't particularly think that this is the best way, and I have a feeling that if they could go back and do it again, they'd probably do it differently, especially when it comes to the insulation. As I said, I've been watching them for the better part of a year, and they've spent a lot of time in Alaska. And as you're aware, Alaska can get pretty darn cold. So, not having insulation probably isn't in their best interest. So, I think I'm going to end this video here. Thank you all so much for watching. I don't mean this in a bad way towards these guys at all. I really, really love watching their videos because they're such a sweet couple. They're really nice people. Their cinematography is fantastic. And I wish them all the best. So if you guys want to support them, by all means, please go to their channel. It's called Aren't We There Yet? And if you want to support them even more, feel free to go to their website, maybe buy some prints. They do photography, they do art, they do music, they do all sorts of stuff. They are essentially the kind of people I wish I could be. And even though I don't particularly agree with the way that they did their bus, I do still think that I do still want to support these people, and who knows, maybe in the future they might decide to do another bus build, and maybe my advice will help. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too highly of myself here, but yeah, no. Please give these guys some your support. I would highly recommend them. And so, without further ado, I'm going to end the stream here, and I will see you guys next time. My name is Cinnamon Roll. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.